Welcome to another episode of the Nintendo Powercast. I'm your host, N64 Josh, and I got a very special guest today, Andres Restart. What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Well, as you guys have probably noticed, we're mixing things up a little bit, and I'm doing some one-on-one interviews. And Andre here is a huge Metroid fan. Like, I'm not sure if I know a bigger Metroid fan. And you've got, what is that? The Metroid Prime,
Yeah.
standee? Is it like
I think they had that when Metroid Prime launched in GameStop back in 2002.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't get a friend gifted it to me a few years back, but I'm pretty sure that's where it's from.
I love it. So we're just going to take a trip down memory lane, talking about why the series is so important to you. It's a series that's massively important to me. I was just saying to somebody that, like, there are, outside of like the Mario games, there are very few games that, like, I would not miss an entry no matter what system it was on. Like, to the point that, like, I never owned a Game Boy. I had to borrow a Game Boy and then borrow somebody else's copy of Metroid 2 and got all the way to the last Metroid before they wanted their Game Boy back. And so I never beat that game like that, unfortunately. So, and so it's just like, you know, GBA games and Fusion and Zero and Prime, all that stuff, like, all super, super important to me. I think it's worth noting, because you have that standee behind you. There's a retro game shop near me. They have the Super Metroid standee.
Really?
And you can see her eyes in the in the visor.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I'll have to walk. If I don't have a picture, I'll go and find one.
I'm not even sure what to think of that, because we're talking about Super Metroid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have any recollection of like that kind of promotional material. Granted, I was 3 back then, so
right.
But the only thing I could think of like Pixel Samus, where you can see the eyes behind the visor, is maybe for it's not even Samus though. It's not Zero Mission, Fusion, because it's, you know, the X Parasite.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look through my phone right now just to see if I can find the photo that I have, because it will. I can send it on over to you after the show here.
Sure.
But it's, you know, it's one of those things. The moment I saw it, I was immediately taken back to, like, you know, this was my childhood. Like, Super Metroid was super, super important, and so you know, it's one of those things you get to kind of fall in love with it all over again, or see something that really just takes you back. And that was definitely one of those moments where I was like, yo, I can remember walking in Toys R Us and seeing these, you know, the marketing material like this. And so many photos. I'll have to dig it out later, because I thought it would be easy to find, but it's not.
Maybe you'll put it in a post or something.
Yeah, it's not popping. Oh wait, here we go. Yeah, it's a video, and her visor is like a clear plastic. And
I lost you. I can't hear you right now.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Oh, so her visor is like kind of a clear plastic, and you can see one eyeball.
Okay. And
then it's dark on the other side. So
okay.
Yeah. So super, super interesting. I don't think they'll sell it. I would love to have that. That would be a great piece right behind me here, but I don't think they will. I don't think they will sell it. So, but let's start with your journey, man. Like, what got you so hooked on the series?
So, I guess technically my first experience with Metroid was with Smash 64, right? Just because of Samus is in there.
Yeah.
And as a kid back then, right? Because N64 was the console. Like my dad had a Super Nintendo, and I have some vague memories of kind of playing a few things with him back then. But I started playing games on Nintendo 64. And so what's interesting about that era, because that was my first era with like really gaming. I love Smash. Smash was so cool, right? And especially as a kid, like you see all these characters and you see stages, and you really have like this. You're like wondering about all these different worlds, right? Like that's how I was. Um, but then I would see Samus and I would see her stages, and I would be like, okay, this is all really cool, but where's the Metroid game? Like, I was like, where is this? I had the same feelings about Earthbound too. It's like, where are these? Like, these characters are not on N64. I want to know more about these games, right? And so, enter the Nintendo GameCube era in 2002, because I don't think I got a GameCube that long. I got the GameCube in the second year. So when I got a Nintendo GameCube was that holiday where Nintendo had both Super Mario Sunshine and Metroid Prime as the 1-2 punch. And like I remember I was in the store and they asked me, "Oh, they have this deal for PlayStation 2. You can get a PlayStation 2 in 4 games." And I'm like, "Yeah, 4 games I don't care about." Right? Like Like there's a new Mario game on the Nintendo GameCube, right? Which to me was hype. And there's this I'm trying to remember like how my feelings were of Metroid Prime back then.
Mhm.
All I could like before playing it, right? Because the way it worked, I think they let me play the GameCube and Mario Sunshine, but on Christmas Day they saved Metroid Prime. So Metroid Prime was like in the tree, right?
Got you. Okay.
Um, and so I remember like this build up to it, like me emotionally, like, well, there's this other game that's just there, like, and it was this is and kind of pulling back to us talking about from the N64 era. Like I've always had this like intrigue of like, what is this world, right? I'm
Mhm.
so curious about this character and this world. And if I'm not mistaken, they did have demos for Metroid Prime back then. So I did have an idea. And I think maybe that was part of the reason why I was so hyped about it. Cause I remember playing the demo of Metroid Prime. And that's the demo of Metroid Prime back then was just literally the beginning of the game, which is one of the best beginnings of the game ever, right? Like exploring the space frigate.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
and back then, I mean, the game still holds up really well today, but back then, it was just shocking how realistic it looked to me. Like it was like realistic, but also crazy because it was in space. Like so it just seemed mind-blowingly incredible, right? And then I finally got to play the game, and it was right.
Oh, yes.
Like Metroid Prime did something like I guess it really helped me to feel immersed in the world. And I think to me that's kind of like the biggest thing with games. Like I really want to feel like escape, right? Like I like
Mm.
playing your fun multiplayer games. Like those are cool. But what's made me fall in love with games are being able to just completely immerse myself into a completely different world, right? So going back to like that intrigue I had for these different game worlds back on N64, I was finally getting into the Metroid world I've been wondering about for years. And Metroid Prime is probably one of the games that did that best because it's all about the immersion, right? Like there's this atmospheric experience, the visuals, the audio, and I just was completely enthralled into that. So that was like my first experience with Metroid, and I mean, I feel like it was like maybe the best. I would argue Metroid Prime is one of the best games ever made, and it's still one of my favorite games ever.
It I love that. I love everything that you're saying right now. Like Metroid, Super Metroid for me was the very first time I had an emotional experience with a game. Because the end of that game, spoilers, it's been a while for that one. But when the Metroid shows up and sacrificed itself, I was like, what? This is a game. Like, why do I care about like? But when you were immediately taken back to
Baby Metroid from the beginning of the game.
Yes, back to back to Metroid 2. right? And how
Oh, okay. You
and
played Metroid 2. All right.
well,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
we talked about this a little bit ahead of time. I didn't beat 2. I got to the last Metroid, and then I had to return everything, and we'll get into more of it. So when I started Super Metroid, I was like, "Oh, that's how the game ended." Like the baby stayed with you. And then I was immediately like, for a game that had like virtually no dialogue, right? Other than some text here and there, like I was like, I remember like talking to my dad and being like, "Yo, the Metroid sacrificed himself," and he's like, "What is a Metroid?" Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Don't you have homework? Like,
yeah. I still have those moments with my dad now, because like there are just things I'm like, "Yo, this really cool thing is happening." He's like, "Oh, that's nice," because he used to game. He used to game, like he actually used to play on the 64 and stuff. And as I mentioned, he played Super Nintendo, but like now he's kind of fallen away from it.
Okay.
Because every once in a while, I'm like, "Hey, so there's this thing going on," you know? Yeah. But I mean, it's I can't. I want to dive into this stuff, right? Because I did. Metroid Prime was my first game, but I did eventually play Metroid 1. I played Samus Returns, so the remake of 2. I've tried the Metroid 2, but it's not as easy to go back to.
Yeah.
Super Metroid, still great, still holds up. I've enjoyed that. I think if I've played pretty much all of them. And I've seen the ends for all of them except for I've seen the end of Samus Returns, which is the remake of 2, but
Right.
I haven't seen the actual end of 2 on the Game Boy.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, but I understand the story you're getting at though. Like it's a powerful moment.
It has solidified Super Metroid as one of my top 5 games of all time. Like yeah, it's just there. It's there. It can never. It just is special, to the point that like outside of Mario games, if it was on Game Boy, like I had to borrow the Game Boy, like I said, to play I had to borrow the Game Boy and the game to be able to play Samus 2, but I couldn't put it down. I borrowed the first game, the very first game. I grew up on a farm. One of the guys that worked on the farm ended up playing Nintendo games and would let me borrow some, which was fantastic for me.
So cool.
And he gave me Metroid, and I was like, this game's impossible. There's no, like, I love it. It's very
without a map. It's
nothing. Just
yeah.
Just here you go, kid. Have fun.
Yeah, maybe
make
your own map, which would be kind of neat. But
yeah, and I remember like I asked a kid on the like in the playground, like, "Yo, you got any codes?" Like, remember you could put the codes in to like progress in the game. And so, like, I don't know, this series has just always been very, very special to me. And so, knowing that we were going to talk, I'm like, you know what? Let's just dig into this thing. So, even Metroid Prime. I mean, like, we can camp here for a little bit. Like, that was a huge deal for the GameCube. Like, for me coming off of the 64, games like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, and then Microsoft bought up Rare. So then that dashed all the hopes of any kind of rival for Halo. Metroid Prime became this like almost like the messiah, if you will, for like yo, Nintendo's going to have a first person shooter, except it wasn't. It was an adventure game. You had to lock on with everything. You couldn't just I struggled at first. I was like, why doesn't this just control like a regular shooter? No. Like why did they do this very Nintendo thing and not just make it a regular shooter? But I think it almost played it. It's kind of like the way Resident Evil plays into the tank controls. It makes things more scary. Like, I almost feel like it played into her suit a little bit. But then like she got so acrobatic, and so like it was like she's not robotic. She's not like slow moving. She's
a agile beast.
Very, very agile. And so it I got used to it to the point that I didn't even think much about it, and that world was mind blowing, mind blowing. Like, and obviously it hooked you. Like,
Yeah.
are there any like real big highlights from that game when you think back on it? Like that really stood out to you? Like for me with Super Metroid, when that Metroid showed back up, that was like the core memory, you know?
So, I mean, as you were talking about that, I was kind of thinking like, Metroid actually kind of seems to have this tendency to have, at least for the 2D Metroid games, right? There are these really big moments, right? And so I think for 2D Metroid, there's a few that kind of match what you experienced with Super Metroid. With the 3D Metroid games, there's technically more moments, I guess. So like the one big moment isn't as shocking. Like, because in the 2D Metroid games, you usually have one or two big moments, right?
Right.
So in the 3D games, I guess like there isn't like one incident that necessarily sticks out far more than any other. If that makes any sense. That said, there are still like things that happen. And I was like, okay, that's crazy, right? I mean, the beginning of the game alone is crazy, and it's so interesting exploring the beginning of the game because like there's a lot of attention to detail, right? Like you probably don't realize it your first or even second time playing through that area, but like there is a story going on, right? And when you read the scans, you look at the environment, you see like, okay, there is like experimentation going on. There are these parasites. Oh, there's these smaller ones, but there's this dead giant one inside this tank.
Yeah.
And then you run into a live one. And that's this whole crazy exchange. Like that whole exchange leading up to that moment is insane.
Yep.
But what's even crazier is that's not even really the climax.
Right.
Like there's the escape sequence, and then you lose your powers, and then you run into a space dragon, Ridley, right? And then you chase Ridley down. And so like that entire thing is just insane. Like there's all these really cool like beats. And then that essentially is just a prologue of the game, and then you open up in Talon 4, and that moment's also kind of crazy. So like for you, I guess my point is that like there's like maybe 6 or 7 extremely memorable moments at the beginning of the game.
Oh yeah.
And they all happen within about 20 to 25 minutes. And that's just the beginning.
And since the remake came back out, that's all the further I've made it. Like it kills me that I have not gone further. I like, even as we talk about it, I'm like, I have to play this game this week. It kills me that I have not.
I've beat the remaster multiple times.
Oh, I wish I could say the same. I wish I could say the same because I enjoy it so much, but it's just life, I guess. It just,
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm still sitting on Thousand Year Door remake. Like I probably should have finished that already, but
yeah,
it's a good game.
I think I'm on the last section in Echoes, so I have been a good gamer, and I've been actually playing, but like Prime is just, and it controls the way it's like this is the game I always wanted it to be. Now it's everything I've always wanted it to be. It's why I continually want to jump into it. So I don't know. I got to do some traveling this week. I may end up doing it doing it on the flight. We'll see. So and you're completely right. Like those were such amazing moments, and those were amazing moments for the time, right? Because like Bowser was probably about the biggest boss you were fighting on the 64. Maybe Turok might have had some bigger monsters, or
that's an interesting. Well, I mean, Ocarina of Time had some.
Ocarina of Time, they were kind of, but
I think Ocarina of Time had some big ones, like Bongo Bongo.
Yeah,
that was crazy
for sure. But I think the disconnect between the polygons not looking like looking like a 64 game versus like this is especially at that time feeling more like this is like playing a movie, right? Like this creature seems alive, not just like oh just kind of like Like just not walking very smooth. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying, and it's actually kind of getting me excited for Metroid Prime 4. Because like thinking about it, right? Like games have evolved so much, right? To your point, like it was definitely harder to put together a massive boss on the N64, right? And you look at bosses in 2D Metroid because it was pixels, like sometimes like a third of the screen or half the screen was the boss. You look at Kraid, right? Like that is Kraid. Like Kraid boss fight he is half the screen. Good luck.
Right.
But and then I think Ocarina of Time did do a good job of bringing some big boss fights, but thinking more on it, like outside of Bongo Bongo, most of them were they weren't huge, right? And then looking at Metroid Prime, like were able to take a huge step in a direction of having these giant epic boss battles, which is a huge thing for me. Like it's actually one of the reasons why I don't like Skyward Sword for Zelda as much as some of the other Zelda. I love Skyward Sword. Like I'm not trying to speak ill of it necessarily.
Yeah.
But something I kind of missed there were some big epic boss fights like Koloktos, right? But there was also these duels, which are cool. I love the duels. But the duels are against a humanoid-sized character, Girahim, and that was like several of the boss fights. So I kind of didn't get as many of those. Oh my god, I beat this dungeon. Now time to see what sort of crazy, massive monstrosity is there. And you get kind of like the David versus Goliath or Shadow of the Colossus kind of like moment. There was less of that in Skyward Sword, right? But at least with Metroid Prime, I think all of them kind of done it. Like they kind of understand, hey, in Metroid, you're fighting giant monsters. Like it is kind of part of the shtick. Like it's Samus fighting these most menacing, crazy creatures. Like the bigger, scarier they can make it, the better. And so like kind of like thinking about that evolution, like we did have those boss fights in Metroid Prime. There were some crazy ones, right? But also thinking on it, those environments are like pretty round. They're almost like arena-like, right? And they did move around, but the movement was fairly simple. And then you look at other boss fights in modern games now. Like actually, I mean, Shadow of the Colossus isn't even modern, but I think a lot of games have taken inspiration from Shadow of the Colossus. Like that was a pretty big deal game, right? I'm a Nintendo fan, and I will acknowledge Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh,
is
absolutely.
A very important game for gaming.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed the remake a few years back, but like my point is that I think gaming has evolved, and now I'm very curious on how they'll handle bosses in Metroid Prime 4. Like how much more involved are those fights going to be? Are there going to be some Shadow of the Colossus moments? Or are we just like, I don't think we're just going to like rotate around this big thing, back up a bit when it gets too close and shoot. Like, I think it might be a more involved experience. Like, are we going to have to do some climbing? We could look at Metroid Dread where Samus gets on Kraid. Those are cutscenes, right? They're interactive cutscenes. They're super cool. Mm-hmm. But how might they translate some of those ideas in Prime 4?
Right.
And it's gonna be really exciting to kind of see that evolution. But anyways, like, yeah, the boss fights in Metroid Prime, they're epic. Ridley, Thardis, Omega Pirate, Flagra. Actually, I know I've been going on for a bit here, but I didn't beat Metroid Prime for years, right? Like I played as a kid, it took me years to beat it. And it took me a long time to get to Flagra, which is the first like main boss after the beginning. Like, because there's a lot of different little things you have to do. And getting to that point, finding like, oh, so that's what this game's about. You see the Flagra. Like, that was a crazy moment. It's a very unique looking boss. Like, there aren't many bosses where it's a giant flower. And there's this giant long thing it's like a flower / praying mantis giant thing. And it's just crazy.
I'm looking it up because I just want to remember, like,
yeah. And it has like a face within a face, right? Like it's like a bug, but then if you look closer, there's almost like a skull-like face. I'm saying it's based off memory, like within its face, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, super creepy.
Yeah,
super creepy. And honestly, I don't even remember it. I couldn't. I played through and beat Metroid Prime so quickly when it first came out that for me to play it again now, it will be a brand new experience.
Yeah, dude.
Like it will be. It will be. It's been so long. That's how it is for me with a lot of these games. Super Metroid, not the case. I would play through that game. I've beat that game a lot. But I mean, and we were talking about like just the size of bosses. Kraid was insane on the Super Nintendo, where it was like 2 full screens, essentially, right? Like that was.
Oh yeah, like you couldn't even see the whole boss on one screen. You had to move.
Yeah, and whereas like Link to the Past, it might have had a bigger boss, but you were just looking down at it the whole time, right? Like there was nothing all that like
Right.
it wasn't like you were, and so I think Metroid is all. I mean, even at the end of Super Metroid when Mother Brain transforms. I mean, that was like these are epic moments. These are like movie moments, that you just weren't used to in video games, and I think that's why it really just stuck with me the way it did, and why I loved it so much.
Because I actually just beat Zero Mission like maybe a month or so ago. When you fight Mother Brain, Zero Mission's a remake of 1, right? Mother Brain's just the brain. Like I don't. Does it? It comes out only in like it becomes this giant monstrosity only in Super Metroid, right?
No, I think in Zero Mission it does also.
Does it come? Wow, my memory. I beat it, and my memory's already foggy of it.
I'm gonna check right now, but I'm pretty sure it like changes into like it changes into something kind of similar. So, well, actually, when I just typed in final boss and it brought up Mecha Ridley.
Well, that's a yeah. In Zero Mission, the end is not the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have a very clear picture of a creature. And so I want to see if it's not what Mother Brain changes into, it's something else. It has kind of a sharp, like pointier nose, I thought. Like, so I'll have to do a little bit of research and dig it up. But I thought it was the mother. I thought it was a Mother Brain.
Maybe it is. I just don't remember it.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, okay, no, it is. I see. Well, that's Super Metroid. I don't know. I gotta go back. Solver.
Yeah, well, and when I type it in, a lot of it looks like it looks like the Super Metroid stuff. It's not showing, and I could be thinking about a different boss because again, it's been so long since I've gone through these games. So I'm just taking a quick peek at all the bosses real quick.
At footage of Zero Mission. I'm fast forwarding the Mother Brain fight because I remember fighting the brain, and then I was like, "Oh, the fight's over." Okay, nah. So you don't. I don't think you. Yeah. All right. So I just looked at the footage. Yeah, an escape sequence activates the moment you beat the brain.
Okay.
But the brain doesn't come out of the ground like it does in Super Metroid.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
but I mean, I guess
the creature I'm thinking about, I'm not seeing. I feel like it's even in the artwork on the like on the box or something. I don't know. I'm gonna have to. I'll tweet at you or something when I finally see it because I'll be like, wait, this was it. I thought it was Mother Brain, but it's not. But yeah. But I mean, again, those moments are just they were crazy. They were so
I guess
iconic.
I'll say for Super Metroid though, like just looking at it in hindsight, right? The brain coming out of the ground or whatever, and it becomes this giant thing. That subverts your expectations because you just think you're fighting the brain again, and you're not. There's more to it, and so that's really cool. Yeah, but after Metroid Prime, my next game was Metroid Prime 2.
Really?
Yeah. The fun fact, I think that's the only Metroid game I haven't beaten. Oh, I mean, I guess we want to count Metroid 2, but I kind of don't because Samus Returns is a remake of it. But yeah, Metroid Prime 2 I haven't beaten. I've gone all the way. I've beaten Quadraxis, like the penultimate giant big boss, but you have to get the keys before you can go fight the Emperor Ing and have your final fight with Dark Samus. And it's that sequence I haven't been able to do because the last time I got to near the end, I was like, oh, I have to collect the keys. That sounds like a real pain right now. And so I didn't do it. Because navigating Metroid Prime 2 is a lot harder. Like the Dark World, Light World stuff it's challenging. And the level layouts are sophisticated.
I got basically soft locked in 2.
Okay.
I got a save point at a boss fight.
Yeah.
With no health. And you can't go back where I was at. I had to beat it without getting hit essentially. And I couldn't do it. And it was probably the second or third boss. And I was like, I can't just start this out. And I never went back to it.
That sounds hard. Like, I think there are some I know like there are parts in that like you got to save, but the save station heals your health, right? Yeah. Save station heals your health, but like I think you could have like no ammo. And that's where you're kind of like, I don't have any way to.
And maybe that's what it was. Maybe I had no missiles
that's probably what it is. You have no way to hurt it like effectively.
I think, yeah, there was something like that. It's been so long, but
I've gone back to Prime 2 a few times, like just to like record some footage or something for a video.
Yeah.
And every time I'm like, oh, this is extremely frustrating because the resource management also makes it's not just navigating the world that's harder. It's also the lack of resources. And when you need those resources to fight, like you can fight without it, but kind of not. It becomes a real pain because technically, if you have no ammo, you can charge the darker or like light beams.
Yes,
but it takes a while to charge one shot, and it's not even a strong shot. It's just like, okay, here, this is so you can. It's basically there just so you can go through doors.
Right.
Like it's you're not killing any bosses with that. So it's pretty intense. But I'm looking forward to a hopeful, remaster or port of some kind, so I can actually go back and actually beat Prime 2.
Yeah, I have the trilogy on Wii, but like I didn't want to play the third game because I didn't want to play it with the Wii remote.
Oh yeah, it's a good game though. Prime 3 is fun. You probably won't get stuck. Not like Prime 2 at least.
I see.
Yeah.
And I also did a little bit of research here. I think it was the Omega Metroid that I was thinking in Fusion.
Okay.
That was the that I thought was Mother Brain transforming. It's the Metroid. Like I think it doesn't.
Yeah, it becomes like this giant monster.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that's what I was. That's what in my mind I'm like. I know it's the end of a 2, but it was not Zero Mission.
I think the Omega Metroid blocks you from getting out of the ship that's going to blow up any minute.
Yes. So. Yeah. So anyway, there we go. I was like, I know I'm seeing. I can picture the sprites. Like
you remember right something. Like it exists. What I'm talking about is real.
It's right there. Yeah. So, but yeah. So that's the lack of playing through Prime 2 and 3 is there's big time selfish reasons that I want those games coming to the Switch. I want to play through them. Like I want to play through them before 4
with dual analog control.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, my GameCube controller's always hooked up to my Switch, so I still will jump in with that controller just because I love it. As long as it doesn't need the second L, like the L button or whatever, because then I you can't do that. But like playing Sunshine or whatever on the 3D All Stars, like I'm gonna grab the GameCube controller for that for sure. So, but yeah, so I like I remember being hyped for Prime 2, picked it up, was so excited, I was like, I'm gonna have to start this over. And I did not. And I think like
I think Metroid Prime 2 is like the most hardcore game ever made.
and I think that was the case. I was like, this was so difficult to get to this point that I was not having as much fun. And so that's why I was like, I'm gonna bail out on it, you know? Like I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. And I think you were right. I don't think it was a lack of health. I think it was a lack of ammo. I was like, and I don't think it was giving, and who knows, I may have just been super bad, but I was like, this feels unfair to the point that I'm like, if more of it's going to be this difficult, forget it. I'm out. You know,
it's tough. It's a tough game. I mean, I'll just say, like, for example, like, I have no problem beating. I mean, I shouldn't say I have no problem. I have problems beating Soulsborne games, but I do beat them. Right?
Yeah.
It's not the fights. The fights can get tough in Soulsborne games, but like Prime 2 is on another level of difficulty. Yeah, the fighting is hard, but it's the navigation and survival that I think make it really, really tough.
Now I want to play it even more because although I don't play many Soulsborne games, I loved like Ninja Gaiden before it got like the original one on Xbox. Like I would go to bed at night, I'm trading this game in tomorrow, and then I'd jump back in and get a little further and beat another boss, and finally I beat the whole thing. And so so now hearing you say that, I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. I want to now. I really like come on Nintendo, give us the give us the other two. We need it. So Fusion came out the same time as Prime.
Yeah.
What was it like going back to the 2D games for you? Like which one did you start with?
My experience with the 2D games is different. Like I had a Game Boy Advance, but I didn't play the 2D Metroid games until I want to say the 3DS era is when I started. So the only handheld, so I guess technically I started playing handheld Metroid in the DS era, right? Okay. Which is technically not 2D Metroid. They put the Prime games on. Yeah, Metroid Prime. Well, so at first it was Metroid Prime Hunter's First Hunt, the demo,
right?
They packed into the Nintendo DS, which was fire, right? And it's a unique experience compared to Prime Hunters. Like you should have both, right? So I really enjoyed that. That was fun, but that's just more Metroid Prime essentially, right? And then I fell in love with Metroid Prime Pinball.
Of course, okay.
That is so good. It is so good, and it came with like a rumble pack, so you put it into the bottom side of the DS, and so it would feel the vibrations.
Oh yeah.
Such a good pinball game. It's probably, I would say it's underrated. And then eventually I played Hunters, and that was fun too, right? But it wasn't until a 3DS I started to experience 2D Metroid. And so what's interesting about my experience of that, right? Like the 3DS came out first, and then the Wii U came soon after. I didn't buy 3DS at launch. I waited a few months. But I bought a 3DS that was technically used, but it had the Ambassador program.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So I was able to get Ocarina of Time 3D with the first save file completed. So I was able to start in master mode for Ocarina of Time 3D, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't have to play through the original quest again to do that. But then I also had the Ambassador program on this 3DS. So the 3DS was like new. So it was like a heck of a deal for me. And so through the Ambassador program, the first game, 2D Metroid game I actually started really sinking my teeth into was Metroid 1. And so I did use map assistance to get through that game, but that was my first 2D Metroid game that I played through from beginning to end.
We're talking the NES game, not Zero Mission.
We're talking about the NES game.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the game I played on 3DS first. After that, I'm trying to see if I'm lining things up correctly here. I'm not sure which one happened first, but the Wii U came out, right? And the Wii U, Wii we like the Wii U as hardcore Nintendo fans, but it did lack a lot of original Nintendo games like we've had for other consoles. But something that the Wii U really like did well with is Virtual Console.
Oh yeah.
And so there was a time where I just basically went back to a lot of Super Nintendo games and stuff and played through those. So though I'm thankful for the Wii U at the very least because it allowed me to enrich my history of Nintendo before the N64 time. Because I got to play things like Earthbound, for example, A Link to the Past, and Super Metroid. And so I enjoyed Super Metroid on the Wii U, and it was a great time. I really enjoyed playing that game. Like it was, that methodical Metroid approach. I really got to appreciate that, and so I loved that game. And I am trying to remember the timeline of. I think I did. You know what? I guess I'll say that Super Metroid probably was my second 2D Metroid game. Because thinking on it now, I probably enjoyed a lot of those Virtual Console games during like the dry spell of the Wii U, and Samus Returns. So the remake of 2 came out in 2017 on the 3DS, but the Switch was already out then. So now I'm like kind of piecing together my timeline. It makes sense that I would have played Super Metroid in that calm before the Switch era, right? And so Samus Returns came out on the 3DS during the Switch era, but for 3DS, right? And I love the heck out of Samus Returns. Like I really that was a great remake, and what they added to the end was so cool. But I did get to see that story, right? I understood. I saw the story of Super Metroid. I understood that Samus had saved a baby Metroid, right? Going from 2, even though I didn't play it, and so I understood what was going on at the end of Super Metroid when it sacrificed itself. But then I get to see that baby Metroid following Samus around for a little bit, fighting with Samus at the end of Samus Returns. That was a cool experience. So yeah, that was, I guess I played 1, then 3, then 2. And then I'm trying to remember when I played Fusion. I don't know if it was on Wii U. I think it was on Wii U. Was it? Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't remember if I played on Wii U or Switch, but I definitely played Fusion after at some point. I will say I played. I want to say I played Fusion before Dread came out, because I understood that Fusion was a sequel to Dread, right? Metroid 5, and so I made sure to go back and play Fusion before Dread, so I could have a better appreciation of the story going into Dread, which I did, and that was epic. And so I feel like this one I've explained. I've played all the 5 Metroid games by Dread. So
yeah, when Fusion got announced, and Prime, and they came out about the same time, then there was like stuff you could do, like you could interlink your Game Boy to your GameCube and be able to like have the Fusion suit in Metroid
that was
Prime.
So cool.
I was so into that stuff. Like my GBA and my GameCube, I would take NES games from Animal Crossing and put them on my GBA and be able to play them that way. Tortimer Island, like I just loved that link cable, and so getting to do that with Metroid was so great. And but I couldn't put Fusion down. I couldn't. Fusion felt like, it was it was the sequel to Super Metroid that I wanted for so long. Like my only complaint is that I just felt like they dumbed things down and made it a little bit too easy with like kind of giving waypoints and things like that, and I was like, that's a little bit of a, but the sprite work and the way you were getting hunted, even though you were supposed to be the hunter, like all of that stuff just worked so well in Fusion, and I loved it. I remember doing road trips and being the passenger and just like no lifing. Like I was probably the worst passenger ever because I was so engulfed in Fusion. And then I did the same thing when Zero Mission came out, and just like I beat both of those games so quickly because I just love the series. I don't remember them. I don't really remember them, So it's a good thing, honestly, because I'm like, well, now they're on my Switch. I can go back and play any of them now. And I think it's worth noting because it was a special time in gaming. Game Boy, like regular Game Boy, Metroid 2. I have vivid memories sitting in my living room as a kid with the lamp on because that was the best way to get the light to hit the screen just right. Just wiping out Metroid after Metroid as they were evolving and everything, you know, and just having such a like lost in that world, just absolutely lost in that world, and loving every minute of it, and then just being so heartbroken. Like I can still remember we had to drive somewhere and I couldn't beat it in time, but it was dark where we were going, so I couldn't complete it, and then I had to return everything. And I remember just like looking out and the rain is hitting the window. And I'm just like so depressed because like I wanted to complete this so bad because I was loving it. It was such a great time. And I think the only title I've never touched, but I do hear people like, is Other M. And what are your thoughts on it?
Okay. I'm trying to remember the timeline for Other M. I want to say I played Other M probably not too long after, maybe like a year or two. It was a summer during college, maybe 2012 summer. I remember my parents. So I was back home, and I had a summer job at Target. And I'm not sure how that's relevant, but it was right, and I had to. I just remember like my parents went away for a few weeks for a vacation, and my brother was not living home at the time, so it was just me in the house. And I had to paint the fence. That's a project they wanted me to do right while they were gone. And so that period of time, like I had this part-time job at Target, the summer job, right? I had to paint the fence. And that was my life. But one other element. The other element was Metroid Other M. So there's this 2-week window where it was painting the fence, going to work, and playing Metroid Other M. I had found it. Maybe the reason why its Target is relevant is because I found it for like $7 in a bargain bin. It was either Target or GameStop, which is insane because back then games were worth $50, right? And so the game wasn't that old. I think it was maybe just 2 or 3 years old. And I knew of all the things that people said negatively about it, but I was a Metroid fan. I wanted to give it a try, right? And since I saw it for $7, I was like, well, might as well give it a try. It was the best $7 I've ever spent.
There you go.
So good. There were like some frustrating parts. I remember like it was so cool being able to like turn around the Wii remote and being able to see, like be able to shoot things like that way, switching between the two different perspectives was cool. It was a little wonky, but it was cool. What I didn't like was there were certain points where you had to find something on screen. And there was a point in the game where I was out in some sort of field. It was a simulated field because there's no actual real fields, right? It's all like these areas that it's all in a space station, but I was trying to find like something. I don't know what I was trying to find, but it was something I was trying to find, and I could not find it for days. I would just be there for an hour or two, like there's nothing here to target. Eventually, I found it, right? But it was the worst Where's Waldo moment ever. And so that was frustrating, right? The story was, I mean, maybe melodramatic, I suppose, but the gameplay was so good. It was still creepy. It was still badass. There were still these really cool monsters, these really cool abilities. The fighting was great, and there was even a post-game boss afterwards. And so it was a fun experience. Like, save for the Where's Waldo moments, it was a really good experience. And maybe I'm somewhat biased here because I got it for $7, so it felt like a heck of a deal.
Yeah.
But $7, $50, it was still a fun game to me. Like I'm happy they got to play Metroid Other M.
It's funny. I have a similar story with it. I never played it. I never opened it, but I bought it like well into the life of the Wii U. Like my Walmart still had copies of Other M forever. And it got down to like $7. I'm like, I just got to get this in my collection. Like I had started collecting Nintendo games at that point, and I was like, well, this is a steal. I'm trying to remember. I feel like the plastic on it might be ripped or something. Like it might not be fully sealed, but
I doubt it's worth that much.
No. And so but similar story. I'm like, well, I have this. When I want to finally go and play it, I'll have the opportunity. But it was one of those things. Like I love Team Ninja, and so the work they did on the Switch with Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, like fantastic. And so it just seemed like such a divisive game that like either you loved it or you hated it, and there was not a lot of middle ground with it. It just, and I think there's one other like redheaded stepchild in the Metroid series, which is Federation Force. And how do you feel about that one?
I mean, I also liked it. I guess I like it less than I would put it under Other M, actually. But the main reason for that is because I didn't get to really finish it. So I guess technically I said I haven't finished Federation Force, like or Metroid Prime 2. But the reason I didn't finish Federation Force is because I want to play. I bought it at the same time as a friend, right? We were both big Metroid fans, and the idea was to play the entire game together, co-op. But we didn't live right next to each other, right? He lived in Philly at the time. I lived in Jersey at the time. And their Wi-Fi drops. Like we would connect, and we would every time it'd be in the middle of a mission, it would drop. We couldn't make any progress. So eventually, both just gave up on it. And the point was to play the game with someone else, right? So like that was. I didn't see the purpose of just trying to do it by myself. So I didn't.
It's one of those games I felt like it's a great game. It's just not maybe not a great Metroid game. It was weird. It was just so, like the art style was so weird. But when I did finally jump into it, I was like, this is a solid title. It felt like doing raids. Like it felt like you needed your other, like, because can't you play with bots? Don't they do bots help you out? Yeah. But the AI seemed not great. And I was like, this would be so much easier with a person that you could communicate with. And so it seemed like a relatively decent title, not necessarily a decent Metroid title. And I feel like if they wanted to do something like that, like get it like Hunters, and then let us run around as different bounty hunters, not these like cartoony, goofy
I mean,
astronauts.
I wouldn't have been against using Federation troopers, right? But make them Federation troopers, like how they look in Prime 2 or Prime 3, right? Like use that kind of style. It would have been cool. Apparently, like Next Level Games was working on a like Metroid multiplayer game with like PS3 level graphics, right? So they at one point they might have thought about putting like Federation Force on Wii U, but they didn't go in that direction, right? I think the art style was probably also them trying to come up with I think basically what happened was they saw that there's like popularity with like multiplayer shooting games, right? Then they wanted to do something along those lines, but they also wanted to make it more inviting for a younger audience. And so there's probably a lot of smart ideas that went into Federation Force, but they went in the wrong ways. And it came out the wrong time too. Like had they waited like a year after Prime 4 was announced, then people might have been a little bit more receptive to it. But also then by that point, people wouldn't have wanted to play it on 3DS, right? So it was just bad timing. Like the game was ready at the wrong time. Probably should have had a slightly different direction in terms of art style and a few gameplay shifts. Like there's a good game in there. It just they made some wrong decisions.
Yeah. Well, I think the last thing worth noting before we wrap up here is Hunters. So I want to talk just briefly about Metroid Prime Hunters. And I was a huge first-person shooter fan, right? Like, love first-person shooters. GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, then got into Halo, played like Turok 2 quite a bit on on both
Yeah.
64 and GameCube. Time Splitters came out on GameCube and the Xbox. Love those games. And so to have a handheld shooter, I was like, this is fantastic. I hate using the stylus. And I had found a thumb stylus.
Yeah.
And so I would play that inverted, mind you, because I play all my shooters inverted. So I would invert on the touch screen. And don't ask me how that worked. I don't even know if it did, but I remember doing some pretty sweaty matches in Hunters. There was a felt like there was a pretty decent community for a while there that was playing that game, and like it was fun. It was a very rudimentary, very simple, like, you know, it almost felt like playing Doom or something.
Mm-hmm.
But there was fun to be had. The maps were pretty decent, and you know, I don't.
Yeah, no, Hunters is like a pretty darn good multiplayer game.
Yeah.
Kind of a mediocre single player for Metroid standards.
Mm-hmm.
But the multiplayer was pretty awesome. And what's kind of interesting about it is that it's kind of like a hero shooter, right? Because you have these 7 different unique characters with completely different abilities, and every match is a little different depending on who's going against who. I enjoyed it. I didn't, you know, it wasn't on the level of the other Metroid games, but it was cool. And I think there was the novelty of being able to play something like that on the DS. It definitely also made it interesting. It's like, whoa, I'm playing a first person shooter online in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a very cool experience. I remember it taking them a while to come out with Hunters. So like I remember like we knew about Metro Prime Hunters. I mean, literally they had the first Hunt demo as a pack-in, right? Like we knew about that they were working on it, but it felt like it took them a long time to actually come out with it.
I remember that.
I want to check out the release date. I'm curious because DS came out 2004.
I remember.
Yes, 2007, but I'm probably wrong.
That may be a good guess. I do recall it taking a minute. That it wasn't.
I was wrong. It came out March 2006, but when you're young.
Things take forever.
Right. Yeah. Like I remember like I remember like the wait for Twilight Princess. I thought it was such a ridiculous amount of time.
Right.
And it was delayed. It was delayed, but like now in hindsight, I'm like, bro, Wind Waker came out in America, early 2003, right? And so Twilight Princess came out late 2006. 3.5 years is nothing.
Depending on your age, though. Depending on your age. So
sure.
I love it. All right. Well, we'll wrap up right here. Let people know where they can connect with you and see some of your content.
Yeah. I make Nintendo news and theory videos on Andre's Restart. That's who I am. Awesome.
So head on over to YouTube. Check that stuff out. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one. Bye now.
See ya. Bye.